I can't believe it. Lauren London, are you serious? Did you guys hear what's going on with Nipsey's daughter? And I'm sorry because it's not even Lauren London's daughter. But they are talking about Nipsey's daughter. You guys have to see this video. When I heard about it, I was like, man, that is so sad. I was almost about to, you know what? So I came across this video and I was like, you know what? You guys want to know about Nipsey. You guys love Nipsey out here in these streets. So let's take a look at this video. Let's hear what they're saying and let me know. Do you guys believe what they're saying? Is it true? Is it false? Comment below. And I just want to say thank you all so much for the likes and the shares and subscribing to this YouTube channel. And let's keep it coming, baby. Check this out.
My daughter's name is Emani Dior. She 4. And her name means beautiful faith in Swahili, but
she grew up without a father. She fought through a custody war that played out in headlines across the world. She inherited millions, but no amount of money could fill that void. And now, at 18 years old, Nipsey Hussles' daughter, Emani, is navigating the streets of Los Angeles on her own terms. And some people are saying she's starting to walk down the same path that made her father both a legend and a target. Emani Dior just hit adulthood, and the life she's living right now is something that would break your heart if you knew the full story. And today, we're going to tell you everything. Yo, what's good, fam? Welcome back. If you've been rocking with this channel, you already know we don't do surface-level coverage. We get into the real story. The facts, the family dynamics, the street culture, the heartbreak behind the headlines. And today we're going deep on one of the most emotional stories in hip-hop right now. This is the full breakdown of Emani, Nipsey Hussle's firstborn, who just stepped into adulthood carrying a weight that most grown men couldn't handle. We're talking about a young woman who lost her father at 10 years old, got caught in a public custody battle that lasted years, and is now standing on the edge of adulthood in one of the most complicated zip codes in the entire country. Before we get into it, make sure you hit that like button and subscribe if you're new, because where this story goes, you're going to want to be locked in from the jump. Let's get into it. Now, before we get into Emani's story, let me keep it 100 with y'all and set the scene. Because to understand what she's living right now, you gotta understand who her father was, where he came from, and what kind of world she was born into. Nipsey Hussle, born Ermias Joseph Asghedom on August 15, 1985, was not just a rapper. He was a community builder, a business visionary, an activist, and a father. He grew up in Crenshaw, South Central Los Angeles, one of the most gang-dense neighborhoods in the entire country. His mother, Angelique Smith, was African American. His father, Dawit Asghedom, was an Eritrean immigrant who fled his country during a war to build a better life in America. So right from the start, Nipsey was shaped by two worlds: the pride and discipline of African heritage and the raw, unfiltered reality of South Central. By the time he was 14, Ermias had already joined the Rollin' 60s neighborhood Crips, one of the most well-known and deeply rooted Crip sets in Los Angeles. This wasn't a choice made out of some thrill-seeking fantasy. In neighborhoods like Crenshaw, the gang structure was the community structure. It was protection. It was brotherhood. It was identity. Nipsey understood that from the inside out. And what made him different from so many others who came up the same way was that he eventually used all of that understanding to try to change it. He started rapping. He started owning property on Slauson Avenue. He opened the Marathon clothing store, literally buying back the block he grew up on. His 2018 debut album, Victory Lap, was nominated for a Grammy. He was having serious conversations with law enforcement and city officials about gang intervention programs. He had cracked the code, how to come from that world and elevate it from the inside. And he was doing all of it while being a father. But here's where we got to address the painful part of the story. On March 31st, 2019, Nipsey Hussle was shot and killed in front of his own store, the Marathon Clothing, on Slauson and Crenshaw. He was 33 years old. His killer, Eric Holder, was a man from the same neighborhood, even affiliated with the same gang. The senselessness of it shook the entire hip-hop community and beyond, and it left behind two children who would have to grow up without their father. One of those children was his daughter, Emani Dior Asghedom. She was 10 years old. So, check it. November 9th, 2008. That's the day Nipsey Hussle became a father for the first time. Emani Dior Asghedom was born to Nipsey and his then-girlfriend, Tanisha Foster. At the time, Nipsey was 23 years old, still grinding in the underground rap scene, putting out mixtapes and building what would eventually become an empire. He wasn't famous yet, he wasn't wealthy yet, but by all accounts, the moment that little girl came into the world, something in him shifted permanently. Now, in the hood, we know that having a child young before you got your footing can go one of two ways. It either pulls you down or it lights a fire under you. For Nipsey, it lit the biggest fire you've ever seen. He openly talked about how becoming a father changed his entire outlook, his entire grind. In a 2018 interview with Stephen Curry, Nipsey said, and I'm paraphrasing here, that in hindsight, having kids was probably the best thing he ever did. That's how he felt about being a dad. That's how much Emani and later Cross meant to him. What's important to understand is that Nipsey and Tanisha's relationship was on and off for years. He later fell in love with actress Lauren London, who he was with from around 2013 until his death. But through all the relationship complexity, Nipsey never stepped away from Emani. He was present, he was active, he took her to events, he shared those moments on social media, and multiple people in his circle confirmed over the years that his bond with Emani was something real and deep, a relationship that went beyond just showing up for cameras. Emani grew up watching her father be more than just a rapper. She watched him turn a clothing store into a movement. She watched him host free health fairs in Crenshaw. She watched him sit down with politicians and activists. She got to see the version of Nipsey Hussle that the rest of the world was only just beginning to understand. And in her young mind, that was just her dad. A man who showed up, who cared, who had a plan, and who tried every single day to be a compass in a neighborhood that had none. Former associates and family members have spoken about how Nipsey would emphasize integrity and leadership to Emani, trying to give her the kind of grounding that would carry her through life regardless of what came. For a young girl growing up in the shadow of Crenshaw, those lessons were invaluable. She was surrounded by a complicated world, but her father was trying his hardest to be her anchor. And then, without warning, that anchor was ripped away. March 31st, 2019. Emani was 10 years old. She woke up that morning as the daughter of a living legend in the making. By that afternoon, she became the daughter of a martyr. Let that sink in for a minute. For those who know the culture, losing a father to street violence in South Central is not an abstract concept. It's a specific generational wound. But Emani's loss happened in the public eye, in front of the entire world. The internet exploded. The vigils outside Marathon Clothing drew thousands. The tributes from Jay-Z, LeBron James, Barack Obama, and countless others were everywhere. The whole world was grieving her father, and she had to process her own private pain inside that very public storm. There was nowhere quiet for her to fall apart. The grief had an audience, and that audience never left. Weeks after his death, in May 2019, there was a hearing in LA County Superior Court, and Emani was present. TMZ reported that when she saw her mother, Tanisha, in the courtroom that day, the emotion in the room was overwhelming. Tanisha reportedly broke down in tears. The hearing was over who would be Emani's legal guardian going forward, and that is where one of the most painful chapters of her young life truly began. Here's where the story gets real complicated, fam. Nipsey's family, his brother Black Sam, his sister Samantha, and his mother Angelique, moved quickly after his death to obtain legal guardianship of Emani. Their concern? That Emani's mother, Tanisha Foster, was not in a position to properly care for her. The family alleged that Tanisha had a history of substance abuse and had been involved in troubling incidents around children. Tanisha, for her part, voluntarily agreed to allow the Asghedom family to take guardianship, at least initially, because she recognized her own financial limitations and wanted to make sure Emani maintained the lifestyle and connections she had built with Nipsey's family. She trusted them, and according to Tanisha, they didn't hold up their end of the deal. In 2022, Tanisha filed a petition to have the guardianship terminated. She claimed that Nipsey's family had used their financial power and influence to restrict her access to her own daughter. She claimed they had promised financial support and involvement that never came through the way it was supposed to. She said Emani longed to live with her mother, that Emani herself was asking when they could finally be together again. There is no longer any need for guardianship, Tanisha wrote in her court filing. Emani routinely asks me when are she and I going to be able to live together. She longs to be with me as her mother. I am begging the court to terminate the existing guardianship. That's some real heartbreaking stuff right there. A mother separated from her child, pleading with a courtroom just to be allowed to raise her own daughter. And on the other side, a family fiercely protecting the child of a man they loved and lost. For years, Emani was caught directly in the middle of all of this. Growing up, grieving, and watching the two sides of her world fight over her in legal documents and courtrooms while she was just trying to be a teenager. Now, the real kicker, and this is the update a lot of people have been sleeping on, is that in March 2025, this custody battle finally reached a resolution. According to court documents filed on March 5, 2025, Tanisha Foster was officially granted joint physical and legal custody of Emani, sharing that custody with Black Sam. Here's how the arrangement breaks down. Emani spends 60% of her time with her mother, Tanisha, and the remaining time with her uncle, Sam Asghedom. As part of the new agreement, Nipsey's mother Angelique and sister Samantha step down from their roles as co-guardians. Sam remains the sole guardian on the family side, while Tanisha and Sam share equal decision-making rights when it comes to Emani's well-being. The court agreement also states that Tanisha retains her full parental rights, something she had been fighting to have formally recognized for years. And there was language in the deal confirming that Emani should continue participation in all existing academic and extracurricular activities, whether she's staying with her mother or with Sam. Now, for y'all who might not understand just how significant this is, let me explain. In families dealing with the aftermath of a high-profile death in the streets, especially when money and power are involved, custody battles rarely end this cleanly. The fact that both sides came to an agreement rather than forcing a judge to hand down a ruling says something. It suggests that somewhere along the way, the priorities shifted back to what was actually best for Emani. And Emani, who was turning 16 when this agreement was filed, is old enough that her own voice almost certainly played a role in shaping that outcome. But this ain't just about legal paperwork. This is about a young woman who spent the majority of her teenage years split between two households, carrying the grief of losing her father, living under the scrutiny of the public eye, and never being given a real chance to just be a normal kid. The custody resolution was a step forward, but the emotional damage of those years in limbo doesn't get fixed by a court document. But here's where we got to address something that a lot of people are curious about, because Emani's story doesn't exist in a vacuum. It's connected to how the entire Asghedom family and circle is living now, years after Nipsey's passing. The question of income, legacy, and day-to-day life is central to understanding what kind of environment Emani is growing up in. Let's start with the estate. In November 2023, Black Sam filed a full accounting report of Nipsey's estate holdings, and the number that came out was $11 million. That breaks down like this. Roughly $7 million sitting in various bank accounts, and the remaining $4 million spread across business interests, including 100% membership in All Money Inc., 100% interest in Marathon Studios, 100% interest in the Marathon Touring Company, 100% interest in the Marathon Clothing Inc., and Nipsey Hussles' full trademark portfolio. That is a real, functioning business empire, not just memorabilia and merch. The report confirmed that Emani and Cross are the sole beneficiaries of their father's estate, each receiving a 50% share. Because Cross is still a minor, his share is being managed on his behalf by his mother, Lauren London, which technically makes her a part owner of Nipsey's businesses. Emani's share has been managed through the guardianship arrangement with Black Sam. Black Sam has been the engine keeping Nipsey's legacy alive from a business standpoint. The Marathon Clothing is still operational, both the physical store on Slauson and the online shop. Black Sam also confirmed the development of a Marathon Burger restaurant near the original Marathon Clothing location, a fast food concept built on the very same block where Nipsey laid his foundation. That kind of expansion tells you the Asghedom family isn't just coasting on legacy money, they are actively building. Beyond the business side, Black Sam has teased the possible release of new Nipsey Hussle music in 2025, unreleased material that Nipsey worked on before his death. Sam has been careful about it, making clear publicly that if Hussle didn't actually do the verse or work with someone or put together the blueprint for the project, they're not releasing it. That integrity around his brother's legacy is worth noting. He is not trying to cash in on anything Nipsey didn't personally put his stamp on. Lauren London, for her part, has been one of the most public faces of carrying the marathon forward. In 2024, she partnered with Microsoft, Earn Your Leisure, and the Marathon Clothing to launch the Nipsey Hussle 100K pitch competition, a grant competition giving $100,000 to Black entrepreneurs to help scale their businesses. That initiative was a direct continuation of one of Nipsey's deepest passions, financial literacy and Black ownership. Lauren has used her platform, her acting career, and her position within the estate to keep that mission alive every year. So when you look at the full picture, the estate, the clothing brand, the music catalog, the community programs, the business competitions, Nipsey's family is not struggling financially. Far from it. But here's the thing that matters most when we're talking about Emani specifically. Money doesn't fix everything, not even close. Now let's talk about where Emani actually is right now, because this is what this video is really about. And I want to be real with y'all about what we know and what we don't, because this young woman is still building her identity and deserves some space to do that. What we know is this: Emani Dior Asghedom was born November 9th, 2008. Depending on when you're watching this, she is right around 17, turning 18, stepping across the line into legal adulthood in real time. She has been living in Los Angeles, split between her mother's home and her uncle Black Sam's household as per the 2025 custody agreement. She's been photographed at family events and community gatherings, and from what we can observe on social media, she is growing into a confident young woman who carries her father's look and his energy in a way that is impossible to miss. In November 2024, Emani posted a clip on social media that caught serious attention. Fans and media alike noted how much she resembles Nipsey, and the response from the hip-hop community was overwhelming love. People who knew her father personally, community members from Crenshaw, and fans from all over the world poured into her comments with nothing but support and well wishes. She has her father's eyes, she has his energy, and to people who love Nipsey, watching Emani step into her own is one of the most emotional things the culture has witnessed in years. There is something about seeing a piece of someone you lost still moving through the world that is both beautiful and almost unbearably bittersweet. But here's where we got to keep it 100, because this ain't just a feel-good story, and the title of this video wasn't written by accident. There are real concerns circulating about what Emani's life looks like on the street level. Growing up in South Central with Crip culture embedded in her family's DNA, her father was rolling 60s, her uncle Black Sam was deeply rooted in that same world. The reality is that the cultural environment Emani is growing up in has not changed just because her father preached transformation. Nipsey himself spent years trying to step back from that life while still being connected to it. He brokered gang truces, he worked with police departments, he tried to buy back the block and turn it into something different. But the streets around Slauson and Crenshaw don't just transform overnight because a legend said they should. Emani is a teenager growing up in those same streets with those same cultural pressures without her father there to guide her through it. The question a lot of people in the community are quietly asking is, who is watching over her in that specific way? Is Black Sam, a man who has done real work managing the legacy, also doing the intentional daily work of making sure she's not getting pulled into the same gravitational force that took her father's life? These are not accusations. They are the questions that people who love Nipsey are asking out of genuine concern, because they watched a man who tried to transcend the streets get killed in front of his own store. They are not trying to watch his daughter walk that same road. The sad truth is that inherited wealth is no guarantee of safety or direction when the cultural environment around you stays unchanged. Emani will inherit her share of a multi-million-dollar estate, but she's also growing up in a zip code where gang affiliation is still a daily reality, where the memory of her father is painted on murals right outside the very spot where he was murdered, and where everyone who loved Nipsey is watching her every single move. That kind of pressure is something no teenager should have to carry, and she is doing it largely without the one person who was built to help her carry it. Think about what it means to walk into a room in Crenshaw with the last name Asghedom. Think about what it means to go to school, to hang out with friends, to just exist as a teenager, while every adult in your orbit either works for your father's estate, grew up in his shadow, or knows every detail of his murder. Emani cannot separate herself from that history because the history lives on every corner of the neighborhood she calls home. The mural of her father's face is around the corner from where she sleeps. The store that bears his legacy is the same spot where he took his last breath. That is not a background detail. That is her daily reality. Now, for y'all who might not be from the culture, let me break this down so it hits the way it's supposed to. In communities like Crenshaw, legacy is everything. When your father is Nipsey Hussle, you are not just his daughter. You are a symbol. You represent something to thousands of people. Everywhere Emani goes in that neighborhood, people see her and they see him. That is both a blessing and a burden at the very highest level. The blessing is the love. No one is going to let anything happen to Nipsey's daughter. Not on that block, not in that community. She has a protective circle that most young women in South Central could never imagine. The Crenshaw community, the extended Rollin 60s family, the business people Nipsey built real relationships with, the activists he worked alongside. They all have a stake in making sure his children are okay. That protection is genuine, but the burden is equally real, because with that protective circle comes a culture. And that culture includes the same norms, values, and gravitational pull that Nipsey himself spent his last years trying to slowly reform, that without ever fully being able to leave. You cannot be Nipsey Hussle's daughter in Crenshaw and be completely insulated from what Crenshaw is. That is not how any of this works. The observations that Emani may be gravitating toward that street lifestyle, following in her father's footsteps, not just musically and entrepreneurially, but in the gang culture that defined his early world, are not shocking to anyone who truly understands that environment. They are heartbreaking, but they are not surprising. This is the cycle. This is the trap that Nipsey was fighting against with everything he had. And the deep tragedy is that his death may have broken the very protection he was building for his daughter. This is not about blame. It is about understanding what is real. At the end of the day, Emani Asghadam's situation is bigger than one girl's story. This is about what happens to children left behind by street violence in communities that are rich in culture but underserved in the kind of structural support that could actually interrupt these patterns and change outcomes across generations. Nipsey Hussle understood this better than almost anyone. He used to say the marathon continues, meaning the work doesn't stop, the grind doesn't stop, the mission doesn't stop. He was talking about himself. He was talking about his community. But most of all, whether he framed it in those exact terms or not, he was talking about his children. Emani is now carrying that marathon. She is carrying his name, his legacy, his blood, and the expectations of millions of people who loved her father and want his story to mean something beyond tragedy. She is doing it as a teenager without him, in the same neighborhood where he was taken, with a family that has done its best to hold things together while also navigating their own pain and public battles. And still, this needs to be said. She is here. She is standing. Every birthday, every public appearance, every video clip she posts is proof that she is moving forward. For a child who lost her father at the age of 10 in the way that she did, in front of the entire world, that forward motion is not a small thing. That is everything. The real question is whether the systems around her, the family, the estate, the community, the legacy infrastructure Nipsey spent his life building, are doing the deep, intentional work required to help Emani become the woman her father believed she was capable of being, the one he was investing in before he was taken. Grief does not run on a schedule. And growing up in the public eye, with no room to grieve quietly, with a whole culture watching and projecting expectations onto you, that kind of pressure can push a young person in directions that no amount of money or legacy can course correct on its own. Emani needed more than a guardianship arrangement. She needed consistent, intentional mentorship. She needed space to figure out who she is outside of her father's story. She needed, and still needs, people around her who love her for Emani, not just for what she represents to the culture. Because Nipsey Hussle didn't just leave behind an $11 million estate. He left behind a daughter who, in the next few years, is going to make the decisions that define the rest of her life. And the marathon he started, the real one, the one that was always about people, not just music, depends on her being okay. Look, fam, Emani's story doesn't have a clean ending yet, and that's exactly what makes it so important to talk about. She's not a closed chapter. She is a young woman, right now, in real time, figuring out who she is and what her life is supposed to mean. She has access to wealth that most people in her neighborhood will never see. She has a support system built around one of the most beloved names in hip-hop history. But she also has wounds that no dollar amount can close, and a road ahead that requires a lot more than money to navigate with any kind of grace. Nipsey Hussle spent his whole career telling the world that ownership, community, and perseverance could beat the odds. He was the proof of concept. And now his daughter is the next test of that theory. At the end of the day, we want to see Emani win. The culture wants to see her win, not as Nipsey's daughter, but as Emani Dior Asghadam, standing on her own, building something that makes his spirit proud. The marathon continues, and right now, more than ever, it continues through her. What are your thoughts on Emani's story and what her future holds? Drop it in the comments. I genuinely want to hear from y'all on this one. And if this video hit different for you today, Make sure you smash that like button and tap the video on screen for more deep dives just like this one. We appreciate every single one of you who rides with us. Peace.